Well, President Obama turning heads with his comments about the standoff with Russia over Ukraine, saying when it comes to U.S. national security, he's got bigger worries. Listen.
Russia's actions are a problem. They don't pose the #1 national security threat to the United States. I continue to be much more concerned when it comes to our security with the prospect of a nuclear weapon going off in Manhattan.
Frank Gaffney is the president of the Center for Security Policy. Ambassador Adam Morelli is a former deputy assistant secretary at the State Department and former U.S. ambassador to Bahrain. And since you both gentlemen are in D.C., I just want to show you what we're waking up to in New York. It's a newspaper. I'm going to hold it up here so our viewers can see it. It says, "Thanks for sharing a nuke in NYC, Mr. President, ? And it has a nice little mushroom cloud there, so it brings it to life for all of us. I mean, Frank, so many questions to ask on this, but what's your reaction to the president's comments yesterday?
Well, in part, I must say I welcome the injection of a little reality into much of the administration's behavior on this subject. We do face nuclear threats. I'm not sure that the most important one is a bomb in New York City. I'm at least as concerned about a bomb over New York City, or for that matter, over Cleveland or over Omaha, that would unleash something called electromagnetic pulse. We've been learning a lot, thanks in part to your programming, about the vulnerability of our electric grid. It would mean not just the loss of a city, horrible as that would be, but conceivably the loss of the power that supplies the entire country. That's the kind of thing that we do need to be talking about. Unfortunately, what we've seen in betraying Ukraine, which has of course dominated the news of late, is that those countries that had nuclear weapons, in this case the old Soviet Union's nuclear weapons, and that gave them up, may be at very considerable risk. And that means I think it's much less likely that other nations in the future are going to be persuaded to give up their nuclear ambitions, particularly the bad guys like Iran and well, for that matter, North Korea.
Ambassador, I want to get your thoughts on this as well. I just want to add this little news in because the president made that comment coming out of The Hague, and this was a nuclear summit where they were creating new guidelines for countries to follow in order to keep their nuclear weapons safe from terrorists. So there was a little bit of an irony, but also a connection to why the president was in Europe. But of the 50 countries that were there, only 35 of them signed on. And Russia wasn't one of them, China wasn't one of them, Pakistan wasn't one of them. So just considering that news and what was trying to be accomplished and maybe wasn't at the nuclear summit, what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, and the president's #1 security threat, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think the president is factually correct. Russia is not our #1 security concern. Look, they're not going to launch nuclear weapons against the United States, and they're probably almost certainly not going to invade Europe. So they are a concern. We need to respond to them forcefully with respect to Ukraine and Crimea, but let's put it in perspective. Now, the other point that you raise, and the point which Mr. Gaffney raises, and which is why President Obama was in The Hague, was to talk about nonproliferation and securing the problem colloquially known as loose nukes.
Sure.
That is a very real threat. And there are countries that have not signed on to the strict control regimes that the United States and other like-minded states want to see. That is a problem. That's what the president, I think, was referring to when he talked about a nuke in New York. I mean, it's a colorful euphemism, but look.
It's scary, too, the specifics of it. Ambassador, taking your point just one step further, and then, Frank, I'll get your thoughts on it. Do you think our actions on the world stage as of late are acting as a deterrent for terrorists to go after the so-called loose nukes, especially if some of those loose nukes are in Russia? Ambassador?
Yes and no. Look, this is a ongoing problem. There are more nukes out. Well, there are a lot of nukes out there. There are a lot of irresponsible states. The thing that worries me most, frankly, is Iran. I mean, here you've got a state with a proven enrichment capability. They can produce fissile material that can create a dirty bomb. And they have ties to terrorists, Hezbollah and other bad guys who want to do us harm. That is a very toxic combination. It worries me. And I think that when you talk about creating international regimes and international efforts to control loose nukes, let's start with Iran. Let's start with the irresponsible states.
Well, and so that brings up this question, Frank, at the center of it. Are our actions actually deterring loose nukes coming to the global stage. So it's one thing to state a #1 security problem or concern. It's the other thing to actively deter that from happening.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I think that the answer is implicit in what we've already discussed. The unreality of the administration's policies are we've focused on ridding the world of nuclear weapons, starting with ours. The Nuclear Security Summit, as you've just indicated, involves a lot of countries that aren't threats, rogering up to some kind of new restrictions and control. The countries that are threats, whether in their own right, and I must say, I hope the ambassador is right, but I hate to rely on hope that the Russians' massed nuclear weapons aren't a threat to us at some point in the future. We should have a defense against those. But beyond that, we've certainly got a threat we can agree upon out of Iran. And instead of actually preventing that country from either being a source of nuclear threats to us or a source of loose nukes, if you will, we're enabling, under the Obama administration's deal with Iran, them to become a nuclear power. And I must say, I think this unreality is what we need a serious debate about. I hope the president's comments will stimulate that. It's long overdue.
Well, we hope to have you both back to take that debate further. Ambassador and Frank, thank you so much. Great to have you both. And we'll see you back here soon. Thank you.